Hello, everybody, and welcome to GTM in the Tofu Bowl. My guest today is Liza Adams. She is at Growth Path Partners and a fractional CMO, a longtime executive, and now I would say one of the best AI experts when it comes to go-to-market that I know. I love your stuff, so thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Elaine. So excited to be here. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. Did you have a good holidays?
I did. We went somewhere else, so I got to eat
Fun.
and not prepare. And that's
That's the
always
best.
good. But my time is coming. I've got 27 people coming at Christmas. So, my
Oh,
turn will
man.
come.
I hosted 15 people, including many babies. So it was fun and chaotic, which kind of what I signed up for.
That's awesome.
I saw you recently were posting about most underrated ways to guide AI. And it's funny because I actually was trying to work on something similar of like 13 unintuitive ways. What are some of your favorite things that you were seeing that are kind of like unintuitive, underrated ways to actually leverage AI well?
Yeah, and the reason why I call them underrated is mainly because I believe that not enough people use AI as a thinking partner or as an ideation partner, collaborator. We primarily use it as a question answer engine or to help us create content or to summarize reports. But I tend to use it a lot as a thinking partner, for strategy, for scenario planning, those types of things. So one of the best ones that I love to do is ask it to ask me questions back. And I might
Mm.
prompt it and I give it some context. I might say, I'm thinking about positioning in this way. Here's who I'm targeting, and here's the persona. Here's the key message. Before you help me or assess my positioning, ask me 1 to 2 questions that will help you better do the task. And I think it's a super cool tactic because it helps me in a couple of ways. One, if I'm having a lazy prompting day, then
I like that term, by the way.
lazy prompting day, right? I'm just so lazy. I'm just like, whatever. I don't even check spelling. It essentially tells me what I may have missed to do its work. And the second thing is, I may have not been thinking about things that would be really good for it to understand before it does its work. So I like it having to ask me questions. In the past, I would say things like, do you have any questions? And it sometimes it has questions, but more often than not, it doesn't ask me a question. So now I say, ask me 1 to 2 questions, and then it specifically will ask you a question. So I love that one. The other one that I love is, the rose thorn bud framework, where I
Uh,
say, here's my thinking, assess it from a rose thorn bud framework perspective, meaning rose is the positives, thorn would be the negatives, and then bud would be the opportunities. So I get almost like a 360-degree assessment. And then the last one that I like is assess my thinking and tell me how others with different perspectives might perceive it. So the perspectives might be from a user, from an influencer, from a decision maker, or from someone who's very optimistic, or someone who's pessimistic, or someone who's neutral about it. I think it helps me understand, other people and how they might perceive it. I also just love, making sure that all perspectives are reflected. And I oftentimes have blind spots, and this helps me identify those blind spots. So those are my top three.
those are so good. The question one is such a good one. I've never actually done that, but it reminds me my favorite interview question, or whenever I'm chatting with somebody, I always ask the last thing is, what should I have asked you? Like, what was the
Mm,
question I should have asked you? And I find that that is by far the single best question that I could ever ask because it just gets them to open up and start thinking a little bit more and just giving you a bunch of really good meat. And I've never thought to do something similar with AI. So that one's really good. And then the other thing you just sparked with me is the rosebud thorn thing is you can probably give it any framework. So if there's any framework that you want it to follow, that should be part of your prompting where you're telling it what framework you want it to use when thinking. Now that it can do a little bit more of like the thought and thoughtfulness before it's responding, that's another one that I never thought of. So thank you. Those are great.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, it just comes from, just working with it. And, oftentimes I think about, these aren't unique. This is how I would work with somebody.
Yes.
So, I would be talking with you and and I'd be like, do you have any questions, Elaine? And,
Yes.
I would do the same thing with AI.
I saw somebody post, I'm curious if you've tested this. Somebody posted recently that AI is better, the outputs are better if you're polite to it. Have you tested this if you say please and thank you in your prompts?
I typically do. And I've read a couple of reports that it says that it's inconclusive, but
Yeah.
there are also some reports that says, yes, you can get better responses. So I don't know where the truth lies, but in my opinion, if AI learns from humans, I'd rather it learn that we are polite and respectful, and I will stick with that track right now. So
I find because I watch a lot of people prompting
yeah.
and I see that the vast majority of people are super polite, and I'm typically not. I just am very curt to the point. And when I was reading all the comments to this post, the thing it made me think about, I like your response of, hey, it's going to learn from us. But the one person had said, it's what you're doing on a daily basis, which is how you're going to treat people too. And
Mhm.
so by being really consistent across the board, it's going to make you better in human to human relationships. I was like, bingo, like that is the reason to do it for me at least, that it's just if you start being inconsistent with how you're treating anything in that,
Yeah.
kind of back and forth, it just
There,
feels like a slippery slope.
Elaine, there's a lot of nuances with AI, right? So even in that please and thank you, one of the key things that come to mind is I use it quite a bit. I'm polite. I give it a lot of context. I ask questions, but at the same time, the more words that you feed into AI, the more energy consumption.
Hmm.
There's more energy consumption, right? So does it impact climate? Does it impact sustainability? All sorts of things when we are verbose, when we provide a lot more context, when we use polite words. So I don't know the right answers, but I'm very cognizant of those implications. And as they come up with new studies, my behaviors might change depending on what the impacts might be.
That's very thoughtful of you. So
Got to think about that, right? There's always risks and benefits, and we're constantly trying to balance.
oh, it's so true. And I think that that's also something that's not as talked about. People only are talking about kind of this is amazing, it's pushing everything forward, but kind of like I just watched the documentary on Netflix about consumption, about just like overbuying, which is terrifying, by the way, if you want to just make yourself never buy anything again. But people don't see what happens to all of your discarded purchases and things like that. It's similar. People
Yeah,
don't see under the hood.
yeah, yeah.
I had a question for you too. So this is something I've been thinking a lot about. There is not just a tool shift in terms of adopting AI, but I would say even bigger, it's a mental shift and also behavioral shift. And I'm finding that some people are able to make the shift very easily, and many people are really not. Have you seen either patterns or best ways to help kind of guide people in terms of making the mental shift?
Yeah, and I have a lot of empathy for this challenge, right? Because we're not all built the same. We don't all learn the same ways, and we are preconditioned. So if we look at ChatGPT's homepage or Claude's or Perplexity, we get a very simple conversation box, and it says, "Ask me anything," or "How may I help you?" Like there aren't a lot of tips or guidelines for how to use it, and we're preconditioned to Google search, where we would type a few keywords or ask it a question and it gives us a response. But that's not how AI assistants work, right?
Uh,
It's very different. And I think, because of that preconditioning, it leads us in that direction of treating AI assistants in the same way as the way we treat Google,
yeah.
which works to our disadvantage. So that's one aspect of this. The other aspect of this is this thinking around using it as a thought partner is still fairly foreign to many as a result of that preconditioning. But once we get to the point where we're seeing, hey, I can use this as a thought partner, that thinking process is also not the same for everybody. Some are very structured in their thinking, right? So I tend to think, I've got an engineering background. I tend to think process orientation, structure, frameworks. And I think it actually helps in people that think that way in guiding AI, because
Mhm.
AI tends to be more process oriented, right? But if you're a thinker that is more big picture, more you see the end result, but you don't necessarily see the process of that end result, it might take a little longer to learn how to specifically prompt AI. Just like, I'm not a good painter because my mind doesn't work that way, right? Like the arts and the big, here's just a canvas and start painting. Like, I can't, my brain doesn't work very well that way. But if you give me a process, I'd be able to like very succinctly figure out how to get from point A to point B. So for those who are more structured thinkers, I think prompting comes to them a lot more easily than for those who are not as structured in their thinking. Not that you can't learn to be structured. I think there's a way to actually do that, but it's a mindset shift. So, in addition to it being a mindset shift, it's also a behavioral shift. So, it is definitely going to be, it's going to favor certain types of um, um, learning styles versus others. However, I think over time, as AI gets better, I think prompting will actually become more democratized, and it won't matter as much that one is better in prompting than the other, because AI will be able to figure out context. It will have enough examples. It will understand how marketers think, or how go to marketing leaders think, or how CEOs think. So we don't need to give it as much context when talking to it, if that makes sense.
Totally. It's actually so funny you brought up the context thing. This weekend, I was on a hike and I was passing this woman with like a maybe 6-year-old kid. And I just happened to overhear the conversation. And the 6-year-old kid asked the mom, "What's a hobbit?" And the mom was kind of like really stumbling with words. And finally was kind of like, "Well, it's kind of like a small little human, but furry." And that's kind of where she got. And I don't know why, but immediately my brain was like, this feels like a perfect question to have AI give you like a great answer. The problem is it's lacking context. So when I put in,
Mm.
just to see what would happen, I put in what is a hobbit, and it gives you like a very like academic answer. It's like, it is a fictional character created by J.R.R. Tolkien in his, series, blah, 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 in this year, which is great if you're an adult looking for a very factual answer. But if you're a 6-year-old kid looking to understand conceptually what a hobbit is, it's not great. And I
That's
think right now there's still too much context involved in getting out a good answer, an appropriate answer. But I'm glad you kind of went this direction, because I wanted to get your take on, what do you think happens with prompting? And I guess when? Do you have a sense of like, in the next year, are we going to abstract away a lot of the nuance of learning how to do this? Is this 5 years out? What do you think?
Well, I just recently did a post around, the transparency of technology, that as technology evolves, as technology advances, and we start trusting the technology becomes more transparent,
Yeah.
right? So it happened like in many, many cases over the many inflection points that we've seen: internet, cloud, mobile, social, SaaS. In cloud, we were talking about, oh, is it on-prem or, off-prem? In the internet, we were talking about the routers and the routing protocols, all sorts of things, right? All of the different algorithms. But then over time, it doesn't matter if it's tin cans and a string that allows me to connect to the internet, as long as I've got access, right? I think at some point we will get to a point where prompting is less relevant. It's more about the application of the technology than us trying to figure out how to guide the AI, because the AI will learn from us, from previous interactions. It will learn context. It will learn from what works and what doesn't work. And when that happens, I think agents are starting to do that, right? Because it does things on our behalf autonomously, Now you can argue in which areas it does things autonomously. Is it in goal setting? Is it in planning? Is it in execution? Is it in learning? Or is it in analysis of the performance? Or is it all of it, right? There's none right now that does all of it. A lot of them are doing things more from an automation perspective in the execution part. One, an AI agent, in essence, you know, doesn't require prompting because it does things on our behalf, right? It knows, or it learned, or it's been preconditioned or pre-trained to do things. So as a result, we don't need to do prompting. So when people say, well, when do you think we will no longer need prompting? I would argue that in certain situations today, we're no longer prompting.
Yeah.
So in custom GPTs, somebody had to prompt it, somebody had to put instructions, but ultimately we're democratizing that application or that use case across various users, whether it's in a marketing function, across the go-to-market motion, or even more publicly, just on a GPT store. Somebody's just using it. They're not prompting it. The GPT is actually guiding them to get to the end result.
Totally. And it's these little micro applications for a very specific use case. I had spent a lot of time around the RPA, kind of like the RPA 2.0 phase last decade. And one of the things that just I felt like made them successful versus not was human in the loop RPA.
Mm,
So if you were going to try to do automation across an entire complex task, at some point it's going to break for the
yeah.
most part. And when it breaks, if you don't already have a way to make sure to pull in the human and kind of then get it back on track, it was a bad experience with the product. And I feel like right now, the next generation of AI agents should be coming at it from the point of view of human in the loop. That's just my personal opinion of saying, cool, if I'm giving it a complex task, we're starting here, I want it to go there. Where are the touch points where it might need human intervention or human input, even if it's
Mm.
a yes or no decision? And can you build that into the logic of how the agent works? I don't feel like people are talking about it like that. I think people are saying we're going to automate end to end the entire thing. But I have a feeling that that's going to break most of the time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, you know, much like it took a while before we trusted, you know, someone to sleep on our beds that's a stranger,
It's so
right?
true.
Or we trusted getting into a stranger's car. It will take trust. And I think this will be earned little by little. And when I mean little by little, to your point, you know, maybe the start of it is a very simple task where we're saying, all right, there's not a lot of risk. I will allow you to sign me up for a webinar. Great. But I will not allow you to book my flight to South Africa and give you my passport, right? So initially that might be the case, but over time we might become more comfortable, and depending on who the company we're dealing with, we might have a little bit more trust with that brand, and we're going to allow it to do that. And then there's also this element of control. How much control do you want? You know, from, hey, I want to know every single thing that you're doing. And when you get to a final response, final answer or recommendation, I want to approve it before you do anything.
Yeah.
To, you know what, I completely trust you. You know what's in my refrigerator. You know when I need milk, eggs, and bacon. You will order it exactly when I need it, and I don't need to approve it. Go ahead and order it. And I need it by, you know, XYZ time and date.
Can
So,
I have that one now,
yeah,
please? Like now.
you want that one.
I want that one. That's like the bane of my existence is like grocery shopping for our whole
So
family.
I think it's going to be a matter of combination of two things: product market fit and trust. And trust has two components: who is the company that you're dealing with, and then how much control do you want. In terms of who the company you're dealing with, you know, hey, the ones that are already very close to our applications, so Microsoft, Google, we're already in Workspace, we're already in Outlook and all those things, right? So when it comes to email and documents and sheets, that we might be trusting them more with those types of applications when they begin automating things within those applications. But going outside of that, will you trust them for other things like e-commerce? Maybe in e-commerce, we trust Amazon, but not Microsoft. Who knows, right? And then there's healthcare. We trust a different set of brands for that one. So I think this element of product market fit and trust is going to be really critical in the agent arena.
I agree. I think in general, we're in this trust building phase with AI holistically on the consumer side and the B2B side, and we're not there yet. And I think that some things almost went too far and they don't work perfectly 100% of the time. And somehow people, whether the companies did it incorrectly or the people came in with construed perceptions of what reality is, I think that people try something, the second it's not perfect, they lose trust, and then it takes a long time to rebuild trust. And so I feel like we're in that phase. I feel like Gartner's going to need a new hype cycle for AI where it's like trust building, the trough of, whatever, broken trust.
Broken trust.
Exactly, broken promises. But I think that's exactly right, and I think that you're spot on in that we're out the gate going to have brand affinity for certain companies, and therefore we're going to trust them more. I also feel like existing incumbents have an opportunity, especially when it comes to agentic workflows, of saying, "Cool, here is the end-to-end workflow for this specific use case. Here's how many screens they had to touch. Here's how many clicks they had to do. Can we reduce it by half? Can we reduce it by 70%?" And to me, that's the first place these things should actually go and be deployed in the world, or a simple task like you mentioned. But I just think there's so much opportunity to remove all these unnecessary clicks and screens and inputs because it's repetitive. It's just not useful. It's not adding to the experience.
Yeah, I have no doubt that the technology will be there because we're so close, right? You could see it. Almost every day there's an announcement that allows us to automate certain things or do things faster or connect things. And there's the vision for seamless connected experiences across the buyer's journey from the time they research to the time they buy, use, upsell, cross sell, and then you create loyalty, right? That whole experience is going to get automated. I am less concerned about the technology right now. I think we are going to get there, but I believe that the brands that or the companies that will win will be the ones that have leaders that can reach across departments, that
Yeah.
can actually work with their peers, because it doesn't matter if the technology there, if we can't break down those silos, it will be people that's
Yeah.
needed to break down the silos. Let's just say in the go-to-market motion, break down the silos between marketing and sales and CS. This is now one organization that thinks about the entire customer journey. It's going to be really difficult, I think, at some point to understand where one function begins and another function ends, because it's all going to be feeding into the same data, and the same insights will be feeding those three different departments across the buyer's journey. So to your point on agentic AI, I think the technology will be a lot simpler to navigate than the change management that needs to happen to break down the silos.
I totally agree. It's also interesting because historically, you mentioned three teams go to market. You have sales, you have marketing, you have customer success. They're all customer touching. They're all part of the entire life cycle. Yet it's only until recently that they even had shared goals, like KPIs. And I actually personally think that having AI as almost the overlord is going to be shockingly the best thing for alignment, because I think that it's going to help set and measure strategy related to goals. So if as a company, we have decided our goal from a revenue perspective, a net new customer perspective, a retention perspective is X, it's going to tell everybody how to achieve that. And each person, each team is going to have a way to roll up. But to me, I actually feel like that helps with alignment, because now it's not Mr. CRO, CMO, and head of customer success all clashing, saying, these aren't good leads, and you promised me this, and you're not handling the customer. It's more like, no. Here's what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. Do you think that takes away, though, some either creativity or ownership, or do you think that's actually a good thing for companies?
Personally, I think it's a good thing. I believe that AI is an amplifier.
Mm.
So it doesn't necessarily fix what's broken. It amplifies what's there, and what's there may be good or bad, right? So if
Mhm.
it's good, it amplifies the good. If it's bad, it amplifies the bad. So, the I've always said, AI will push us to be more strategic and more authentically human. And the example that I give is, if you use AI for tactics in campaigns, but you have bad product market fit, you're not going after the right customers, or you have a product that doesn't meet the needs of the customers, and you infuse AI in your campaigns, then it's a faster path to failure, right? Because you cannot out
Absolutely.
campaign a bad product market fit. So AI essentially amplified that misalignment. So, I think it's really good because it's forcing us to think strategically. Hey, before I infuse my marketing campaigns with AI, let's make sure we got good product market fit, right? Let's make sure we got a good go to market strategy. Let's make sure that we have good alignment across the executive team. And then likewise, in addition to AI pushing us to be more strategic, I think it will also push us to be more authentically human. And we kind of talked about this a little bit as well. Like, the technology is less of a challenge; it's the people, right? So we have to balance convenience with privacy, personalization with transparency, automation with the human touch, um, you know, uh, innovation with ethics, efficiency with empathy. Like, all of those things need to be balanced, right? And so I've written about this. I do believe that as AI democratizes things like IQ, EQ will rise. It will
Hmm.
democratize content. Then what will rise will be authentic experiences. When it democratizes reach or access, what will rise would be deep communities, deep connections in communities. So I really do believe that there's this element of our most human superpowers that will rise in the era of AI. And unfortunately, not too many people are thinking about it. We're so scared about AI taking our jobs, when it's actually our innate human superpowers that will allow us to thrive and adapt, and survive in the era of AI, my opinion.
No, I think I totally agree with that. And I was talking to someone else around, people are talking now about micro campaigns, but it's not just micro campaigns. It's also, how do we go and find a small community of similar minded people who are going to help us, as opposed to this, like, spray and pray with everything. It's quite literally like, I don't want to join a 40,000 person community. That's not helpful to me. I don't want to go and get 50,000 emails in my inbox of crap that I don't want. I don't want to read 17 daily Substack newsletters. It's how do you think micro with everything you're doing? And I think that's where the humanity really shines too. It's giving people the freedom and space to find their people, find their content, find like how to learn.
Yeah,
Uh, it's going to be a hard shift though. I feel like it's not something that's very turning on for most people.
I would agree, because we're so used to gaming the system. Right now,
Yeah.
it's back to basics. I
Yep.
keep telling
Events,
it's just
dinners.
back to basics, right? I say, be an amazing human being first, and then
Yeah.
be an amazing marketer, right? So, for example, Notebook LM. Many of us know that Notebook LM can take, a PDF or a newsletter and turn it into an AI podcast. If we do that, if we use that for marketing purposes, for external purposes, be super transparent. These people are not AI, are not human hosts, right? They're
Yeah.
AI hosts, and say why we're using AI for that. Say something like, we want to ensure a more efficient transfer of information, and we're doing this to ensure diversity. Uh, we want to ensure that people with diverse learning styles can learn, right? So not just people that like to read, but people who are auditory learners can also take advantage of this. So I think the more transparent we are with how we're using the technology, the better off the brand will be.
Yeah, I agree. I have a super funny story about Notebook LM. So the very first thing I ever built, we'll end on this note. The very first thing I ever built with generative AI was back in 2018 using GPT-1 and Google's transformer called Tacotron. And the company was called, like the product was called SoundSpot. And what it did was it turned blogs, like corporate blogs, into podcasts. And it was so funny because if you go back and listen, it's horrible. I mean, it felt like magic, but they were robotic voices. It was a single person. It was reading it verbatim, but it's
Mm.
just so funny and cool to see. It was like,
Evolve.
7 years-ish too early, but man, it's so cool now. I'm a very auditory learner, so I was really excited when that stuff came out.
Yep. Put on my makeup, listen. Walk the dog, listen.
I'm
Constantly
listening.
listening, right?
So my whole life is podcasts. It's how I learn everything. It's great.
That's awesome.
Well, this has been super fun. Let's definitely do round two. I just love how you think about this stuff. And every single time we talk, I learn stuff. So thank you.
Uh,
Thank you. Thank you.
Likewise, Elaine. Thank you for having me.
Talk to you soon. And thanks everybody for joining.
Take care. Bye.